Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to the webinar today. Let's wait for a few seconds till all the attendees walk in. Yeah, I believe we have the attendees now. So welcome everyone. My name is Jatin Dhawan. I am the North America Marketing Manager for Kellton Tech. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today that's on leveraging SAP Activate methodology for SAP S/4HANA implementation. This webinar is the second in our webinar series on business transformation with SAP S/4HANA. This webinar series will help you assess your current systems with and processes maturity with respect to S/4HANA and find the right roadmap for your S/4HANA journey. We will be sending out the regular invites for the upcoming webinars in this series and would also request you to please follow Kelton Tech on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook for regular updates and technology insights. Before we get started, I need to go over a little bit of housekeeping. Should you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A section of your control panel and we will address them at the end of the webinar. If we do not have the time to respond to your questions live, we will respond to them via email. As a reminder, this session is being recorded. We will also be sending a link to the recording and the slide deck in the next few days. But before we get started onto today's topic, I would like to provide you with a brief corporate overview. Kelton Tech has been a pioneer of digital transformation for the past decade with operations in North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. Our clients range from startups to Fortune 500 companies with the core strength supported through our ISO 9001 certification and CMMI Level 5 compliance. We are a 1500 plus employees strong and are a publicly traded company. Kelton Tech is a new age global IT services consulting company. We design, develop, and operate digital technologies that create new business models for our clients. Next slide, please. Our services cross six major pillars. Digital transformation. Our digital services span social, mobile, analytics, and cloud-based solutions. Digital integration provides integration services in support of your digital systems. Digital enterprise, enabling intelligent enterprises by leveraging end-to-end SAP solutions as an SAP Gold partner. Outsourced product development and support services. Digital commerce and marketing delivers omni-channel e-commerce solutions focusing on improving the overall customer experience and IoT-enabled platform solutions specifically for the oil and gas and manufacturing industries. Also, we are a SAP Gold partner, SAP Certified Center of Excellence, and certified SAP on AWS Solution Service Provider. I am honored to have today with me Dr. Bandi and Sandip. Dr. Bandi is Vice President Digital Enterprises and Head S4HANA Center of Excellence at Kellton Tech. Dr. Bandi comes with 16 plus years of rich experience in SAP best practices and adopting SAP standard process with a focus on minimizing customization. A doctorate in business studies, Dr. Bandi has a vast experience demonstrating SAP S4HANA capabilities and addressing unique business requirements via delivering prototypes and helping clients draw maximum business value from their SAP investments. Sandeep carries deep expertise in application lifecycle management, program/project management, SAP logistics, and supply chain implementation, PMO. With an experience of 25 plus years, Sandeep works closely with enterprise clients to make their SAP investments yield higher ROI. Now I'll hand it over to Dr. Bandi for taking up the webinar.
Thank you, Jatin. Really appreciate. Good morning, attendees. Hopefully, we'll make this interesting for you. Before we move on, probably I request my colleague Sandeep to say hi to you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bandi. My name is Sandip Tarafdar. I'm our delivery head for North America in Kellton Tech, and definitely very excited to talk to you a little bit about some of my experiences with Activate and some of the lessons learned, at least I have experienced as I've implemented Activate to implement S4HANA in various implementations. Thank you, Dr. Bandi.
Thank you. Quickly moving on, basically the agenda is very simple. We wanted to share our experience the lessons learned. Apart from that, we also wanted the project management, the program management teams to understand the importance of Activate. And many a time there is a question that is coming in, where do I find these templates? Where do I find some of these accelerators? That's what SAP calls. So in this series, we are going to conduct a series of webinars, and in this particular webinar, we are only talking about Activate methodology from a project execution point of view, and that too SAP S/4HANA on-premise, basically for both greenfield and brownfield implementation. But before I get into the details, Activate is a framework. It is built on 3 different pillars. One is SAP best practices. The second one is guided configuration, which is predominantly used in the cloud-based solutions, etc. And the third, the most important thing, is the methodology. So we are today talking only about the methodology, and I will also walk you through the roadmap viewer, which is rich with the content, and we will see that also, so that we will explore together what is the content that's available and how do we leverage that. Then I will hand over to my colleague. My colleague will share the delivery specific lessons learned over a period of time using SAP Activate. SAP Activate methodology has been introduced sometime in 2015, and from 2016 SAP was aggressively promoting by dropping the earlier methodology called as accelerated SAP methodology. And today, in the last 4 or 5 years, SAP Activate methodology has been strengthened with multiple insights that are coming in from the implementations and also the conversions, etc. And as a result of that, SAP Activate methodology has become a single focused methodology for all SAP product specific solutions, and their transitioning in, customer transitioning into those solutions. So SAP methodology initially started separately for waterfall and agile, but of late they have brought in agility into the picture, and that's what we typically call it as hybrid agile kind of a thing. And we will talk about that. So net, SAP Activate methodology is a next generation implementation methodology for implementation and delivering SAP solutions, and the innovations probably sequentially. And we see customers not really appreciating a big bang approach, and many a time we have seen customers asking for sequential innovations and a growth of using SAP product features and also different products, so that standardization is embraced by the customer. So there is agility, and this has been built on agile methodology, and Activate methodology also facilitates iterative way of building, testing, and then taking it forward, so that there is a continuous improvement that happens, and the delivery quality and the success is also on the northern path, upward kind of a thing. So that's about it. So net, what did we talk about? SAP Activate methodology is the methodology that has superseded the earlier accelerated SAP methodology. And today, Activate methodology is all encompassing for all SAP products, be it cloud, be it on-premise, even the system consolidation activities, and also the larger central finance functionality too. So we will see all that in a minute. But if we are focusing our discussion specifically on Activate for transitioning to SAP S/4HANA, there are 2 different scenarios that are really talked about. One is new implementation, which is also known in the business parlance as greenfield, and system conversion is known as brownfield. So Brownfield is people who are already on SAP ECC moving to S4 HANA, and it's a bit of a upgrade and conversion, upgrade and migration kind of a thing. So that's what is typically called as conversion. And the new implementation is probably they found out that their systems are older, and they wanted to take an opportunity to rediscover their business processes and embrace certain best practices, etc. So they may go for it, or they may not be using, the customers may not be using any large enterprise ERP. They may be using homegrown systems and probably mainframes, mini frames, and now they wanted to embark on SAP's latest digital transformation solution, S4 HANA. So in this, what has changed is that there are 6 phases. If you look at it, previously SAP methodology used to have 5 phases, and Activate methodology primarily focuses on 6 phases. What it introduced is typically what most of the consulting teams used to do it. So a discover phase, people can discover what is the right solution, what is the right fitment, and what are those processes that we need to identify and implement. Even at some point in time, what are the complementary products that we need to look at. So there is always an opportunity to do a collaborative discovery so that we understand each other, the customer and the system integrator, and they can do a roadmap for the implementation activity. So that's an important phase. And not only in the greenfield, even in the brownfield scenario too, it's very important because we need to understand the state of the system, and there are certain reports that are generated to understand whether this system has all the qualities, be it Unicode, be it custom code, be it business add-ons. So all those things will be identified. Then there is a preparation, which is similar to the earlier ones, where people get introduced, processes get introduced, project management related activity has been established, etc. So Explore is the name for the business blueprint earlier. Explore, the very word says that we together explore. So there is always an opportunity to work together. And once the implementation begins, both customer team and the system integrator team is one, and they have to show oneness, and they understand the business, their business better. We as system integrators comes with an understanding of SAP and S4 HANA. We also share our deep domain experience, but their understanding of the business is very, very useful if we collaborate together. So that what happens is that whether the solution is fitment, and in the process, we can also leverage some of the best practices and adopt the best practices so that we can look at the best practices as a way forward that will also give you a growth path. Then the scope and configure, mitigate. Scope and configure is look at the scope, whether the best practices are fitting into or not. If there is a unique business process that needs to be addressed, we have to do a bit of customization and a changes to certain configurations so that we can address the unique business requirements. Then we can migrate the data, both master and transaction, at various points in time. Then integrate with the third-party systems and interfacing systems, be it tax, be it bank, etc. And then extend the solution on a cloud platform. If at all we don't want to build anything on the core, we wanted to keep the core clean, then we can do it, test it, then onboard the solution and deploy. So it is typical of our cutover and deployment of the solution. Run is nothing but our hypercare and support. So the same thing here, if you look at here, more or less, you're not migrating anything, but these three are similar, but these two are changed. And this is very, very important. So technical preparation steps and test conversion, and then functional conversion and cutover. So basically, it lays a path for the successful implementation of the project activity and how we can help the customer. And SAP is coming out with more openness and building the accelerators and also giving an idea about how to take the implementation forward. So that is what we are looking at it. So the next question is that, where do I find SAP Activate content? There is something called as Roadmap Viewer, the short name typically RMV. So the Roadmap Viewer is intended to guide the project team in the implementation projects, especially we are looking at on-premise at this point in time. As I mentioned, we are scoping it very clearly so that we can cover that specific activity as comprehensively as possible, but we'll also conduct a series as we see the demand for them. And the roadmap is basically with the phases, as I mentioned, 6 phases, and what are the activities and what would be the deliverable. And once we know the activities, those activities are also into smaller chunks of tasks so that they fall under the umbrella of Activate methodology. And for this will be for all the S/4HANA transitions. We only talked about greenfield and brownfield. There could be a selective data transition also, which is a combination of both greenfield and brownfield kind of a thing. So net, this addresses the S4 specific implementations activity. And there is a checkbox wherein you can select what is important for what kind of scenario. Then there are accelerators that are built and they are linked to these tasks, making them easy for the project team, not only customer side, not only the system integrator side, but also customer side. They can have a fast-tracked way of looking at what precedes and what follows. So this is what typically happens, and that's the link. And you can access the content with a S user ID of SAP. And once you log in with S user ID and give the password, you will be able to pick up the content. Let us see what it is. Okay, I just logged in. Let me refresh it so that it becomes easy for us to look at the whole thing. So this is the what is called a login page kind of a thing for this particular portal. And this is self-explanatory. There are all the roadmaps, and every time they are adding features. Typically, they do it once in a quarter, and they also do it at various points in time, but typically they do it once in a quarter. They update important content, especially the project plan. You can download a project plan in Excel and also in MPP, Microsoft project plan, so that you can leverage that. There will be certain timelines so that you understand how much is the advice time. But again, scenario is different for each of our customer scenario. So you can have that. Similarly, the content specific to each of the phase and what activities it will have, there are accelerators that are available. Certain accelerators are specific to SAP, and the SAP employees only can access it. But wherever SAP and customer is there, everybody can access it. That means with your S user ID, you will have access to it. So that's the background. So if we look at it, what is this roadmap viewer? What is that roadmap viewer offers? As I already said, the purpose of this roadmap viewer is to provide Activate methodology related roadmaps so that you can totally understand. And there are categories by solution. As I mentioned, all SAP solutions will follow a standard Activate methodology, and that can be embraced very easily. And there is guidance that is coming in from SAP. As a result, even if there is a handshake happening between one system integrator to the second system integrator, or from system integrator to the company which is implementing, and they would like to take care of the production support activity, obviously during the run, they have to look at few things so that they understand whether the system integrator has handed over everything as per the run phase of the activate methodology. So it will be useful for all the people. Let me close this and let me click here, explore all roadmaps. Okay, if you look at it, it says general methodology, and the general methodology is for activate methodology for new cloud implementations, especially public cloud general. That's what it is saying. Then activate methodology for business suite, ECC on HANA, on-premise, agile and waterfall. So when it comes to ECC, there's still agile and waterfall methodology available, and this is specific to those two product specific activity. Let's click on cloud specific. This is where we find a lot many versions. SAP Activate methodology for S4HANA Cloud, which is nothing but the public cloud. The new name is Essentials Edition, and there is a methodology specific to it. And once we go through that, we can fast track our activity in terms of project execution. There is a separate methodology for extended edition, which was earlier called as private cloud, and a while ago it was called as multi-tenant edition, etc. Now, single tenant edition. Now it is called as extended edition. So there is a methodology specific to it. So there are changes that can be looked at it, but the intent is to say that everything is available in the roadmap viewer. Similarly, for success factors, HR implementation is happening, and customer is implementing success factors. We can always say activate methodology is there for success factors too. Because in a larger implementation, we have seen system integrator and also customers struggling to understand with different solutions having different plans and different methodologies. And that's where SAP is now coming out with a specifically activate methodology standard guidance and saying that you have to fit into these 6 phases. Accordingly, you should also have appropriate guidance and roadmap. So SAP is building that. Similarly for service cloud, similarly for data warehouse cloud and spend management roadmap, etc. Let's go to our topic of interest, which is on-premise specific and activate methodology for SAP S4HANA, upgraded product integration roadmap, activate methodology for transition to BW4 HANA, and central finance. Finally, you also have what we call it as SAP Solution Manager methodology. Run SAP like a factory. RSLAF is nothing but run SAP like a factory. Roadmap for application operations, business process operations, and control center activity. Let's go back to our activity. So basically, as I mentioned, if you look at here, it's been updated on 3rd of November. And every quarter it gets updated. There will be more content, lessons learned, the feedback that they are receiving from customers. Probably some of the customers could be on the SAP consulting side too, and they'll be getting all that, and they'll be even summarizing the tickets that they receive on certain activities and see whether SAP as an organization can help and guide the larger community of implementation partners and customers. So this is very, very important. And it also brings in some kind of good governance into picture. And if you look at it, there is governance specific activity saying that quality gates, and there are multiple quality gates. Quality gates at the end of prepare phase. For discover, we do not have any quality gate because it's a collaborative activity. We're trying to understand, bouncing the idea, bouncing our understanding, and saying and advising what is good, etc. So it starts, basic project execution activity starts here and ends from an execution point of view within these 4 steps. But this is like a curtain raiser for the implementation, and running the solution and continuous improvement is another one. So if you look at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you will also have a handshake into the run phase. So 5. All these things are very, very important. And that is what, from a governance point of view, that's why it's on the top. We can look at what are the activities, etc., etc. The most also important is that if you look at it, data management. So data is a parallel activity. Many a time we have seen people giving a pass in terms of planning activity perspective, and also in a projection of the activity specific focus that they need to bring in, they may be missing on it. If you look at it, it's starting from here, explore phase onwards. And it cuts across the phases also as we move forward. And you will find this getting extended into the deploy phase in terms of your cutover activity and all that. So we have to look at few things that very, very important so that you will understand. Similarly, integration, analytics. We know from a Fiori point of view, SAP Fiori is the UXM. SAP Fiori also has analytical apps, etc. So that is an important feature which we have to look at it. But as we see the system and explore the system, if there is an analytics specific activity that needs, we can also look at analytics design so that SAP Analytics Cloud can also be looked at. So this is about the phases. Let's go to content. This is where you can do a selection. Okay. And once you select that, you will find specifically information specific to discover. And then you can also come down and specifically you can select, let us say we talked about data management, and is there any activity from data management point of view? Okay, there is nothing specifically there. Let's put the explore phase so that we can look at what is very, very important. We have to look at data migration design, prepare, conduct a data migration assessment, data audit, prepare, present. So it is talking specifically about the data migration, what we all need to do. And it is also mentioning if your software is set up for selective data transition, for a migration service specific to installation scenario only, like this, it is able to give you information very clearly with regard to data management. If you go down, it is here the trick lies. You can select, I would like to see the data management activity specific to new implementation. You can go up and it will be specific to that activity only. New installation scenario only. There is no selective data transition which is available. Okay. Then once you click on it, it will show you what it is and what is the procedure, what you can do. And in the bottom, it also gives you what is called as accelerator. It says that you have a web phase where available migration objects, which are updated migration objects, are available. You can look at the latest version of on-premise 2020 or older version. If you are in the process of implementing the older version 1909, you can look at that. And it also talks about rapid data migration to SAP S/4HANA, the rapid data migration component, and how can you leverage that. It will also talk about migration cockpit, which is an embedded feature within the SAP S/4HANA and all that. Okay. Then let us go remove this. Okay, clear all. Let me select only go to the content. Let me not select anything. Let me select only new implementation. Yeah, I have my new implementation. Let me select only accelerators. So these are the accelerators that are available. Okay, I'm selecting specific to new implementation. If you look at here, anything public, we all know, and we can download that, we can use it. And there is also a web page specific to it, and it gives you information. So look at very, very important messages that are required. For example, look at explore phase. And if we wanted to talk, we spoke about data migration and design template. You can pick up this as an example and look at that, how that is visible, and how you can capture the information. This has been updated some time ago in 2011, but still SAP says that this is good enough, and you can look at the scope, technical design, error handling, security, all that. So you'll be able to see. And it also talks about load reconciliation, at least from a process point of view. Design should have all these subsections, and please address it. So we don't need to look for any template at any place. This table of content can be used as a baseline, and we can start building specific to the activity. This is the beauty of the basic documentation. If you wanted to look at, let's say, data migration reconciliation, okay, what is the process from a reconciliation point of view? It gives you a template wherein it says that what is the conversion process, what typically happens, and then a high level conversion development process. Then it gives you, sorry, I think I need to enable so that I can control the movement. Yeah. You can have all the controls, data conversion process, reconciliation process, specification. If you wanted to have a fire test definition, cleansing, match, etc., all that, it gives you at least a baseline, and you can use it and take it forward appropriately. Again, the fitment has to be looked at it, because it is an older version. It is talking about ECC, CRM, and all that. But otherwise, you can look at some of the database specific activity, etc. So you can leverage some of the templates, and accordingly we can take it forward. Okay. So let's say if we are creating something specific to a particular one, we talked about quality gate. Let's look at quality gate, and that's an important one. And I'm showing it. We are talking about, let's say, explore phase. So explore phase, it is talking and it is mentioning about what we call it as basically the activity, saying that, okay, if you look at it, the roles and responsibilities, TIRCOM, etc., etc. If you go here, work breakdown, structured schedule, do we have it? Similarly, project delivery approach, what is the approach that we have taken? Risk management, issue management, all that it is saying it's mandatory and you have to have. And similarly, it is also showcasing the solution manager specific activity guidelines, etc. So you will be able to get this information very clearly, what you have, and what roles and responsibilities, and what is the topic description, what finally the activity is going to be. Okay, all that you will be able to see it. Let me hand over. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to address it. Otherwise, I can request Sandeep to take over. Before that, probably let me sum it up. The key takeaways that we look at SAP Activate point of view is that it's not a starting point, Activate. Activate has picked it up from ASAP methodology and A2O Agile methodologies, and it has brought in all the best practices that can be used into this. And Activate is growing every quarter. They are trying to add the lessons learned and the practices that they were able to find good, and they're embedding into the Activate methodology. Activate methodology focuses on standards, and best practices is the core. As I mentioned, Activate is built on one of the pillar called as best practices. So we can use that. There is something called as model company as a baseline. People can use it, and predominantly it looks at fit gap, and then certain SAP services can be looked at. It's basically fast-paced, and it demands early preparation. Look at it. That's where there is an investment that people have to do in terms of doing a discovery, so that they can also look at their preparedness from resource point of view, hardware, tools, accelerators, etc. It's basically value driven, looks at agility, at least from a build and unit testing perspective. We can bring that design and build activity on a fast track methodology, and it looks at improvements incrementally, so that sprints, etc., can be embraced. So that's what is basically about Activate. I know we have not covered entire thing, but we would like to share our lessons learned. That's where Sandeep's forte of delivery insights that will come. Hopefully you will be able to benefit out of that. Over to you, Sandeep.
Great, thank you, Dr. Bandi. Can we just go to the next slide? Perfect. So as Dr. Bandi mentioned, right, there's Activate is obviously the new methodology that SAP is recommending to use for S/4HANA implementations. And really it came about in light of a lot of things that SAP has noticed happening as a lot of the implementations have taken place within, ECC and even before that, and recognizing that there are a lot of benefits of going to this hybrid type agile process. Oftentimes when you implement S4, it's a big change for customers, right? Things that consultants maybe understand and articulate in documents aren't necessarily, can necessarily be understood at a well enough level for them to, once they approve, to say, yep, this is what we want. And then what ends up happening is when they see the system, when you're doing SIT or UAT or whatever, they're surprised, or they didn't exactly understand what they approved back in, blueprinting. And now what happens, right? You're trying to make the changes and it's very expensive. Change requests are created, bad blood gets, occurs because, all the good stuff that you're doing in your design documents haven't really translated to what's being developed and demonstrated. So hopefully Activate is here to allow the customer to much more early in the process and much more often be able to see what the system looks like, and be able to approve by actually seeing what you mean when you say this is how things are going to be done. So now, as we have gone through and done quite a few implementations within S/4HANA using Activate, there's been some lessons learned, right? I mean, we've done some things great. We've presumed some things that didn't end up exactly working out the way we wanted. And we wanted to kind of highlight what some of these things are. So there's about 5 major things we have come up with and what we have learned as we have started implementing HANA. establish expectations, obviously train the users, allocate time for planning sprints. And I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that. Focus on data. Dr. Bandi talked a lot about data, right? So I'll talk a little bit about how data in some ways is even more important now, especially earlier on in the implementation cycle. And then ensure proper participation. That's always a challenge, and even more so in using this hybrid agile activate methodology. So if you don't mind, let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about establishing expectations. What we found is when we went to our clients and we talked about Activate, a lot of them already knew it, right? I mean, either they've already talked to SAP, about S4 and SAP explained Activate, or, there's quite a bit of information out on the internet for people to go and see. And in general, most people understand, or at least have heard about the concept for Agile, right? So we came in eyes wide open. Yep, this is Activate, guys. This is our schedule. This is how we're gonna, deploy it, and these are the benefits. And we did a lot of talking, and we dived right in and started doing the implementations. Well, what ended up happening is, people shook their heads in the beginning, but they didn't really understand what that was, and tons of questions would come up. A lot of consternations from the client. Or even some consternation from the project team, the consultants, right? Because in a lot of ways, they aren't able to perhaps do what they think they need to do in time because, the client themselves maybe didn't understand what was required. So establishing expectations is critical. Stakeholders, we need to make sure that they get involved as part of the prepare phase, really understand how we're going to be implementing S/4HANA using the Activate methodology and what it means to the client. And you also have to involve your own team, right? A lot of these people are, very good at their job in, configuring finance or logistics or whatever it is. But to how that translates to working with a client in a daily basis to make sure you're bringing them on with you in the journey is critical. So expectation setting is critical to make sure people understand what it is that you're going to be doing, how you're going to do it, and what level of support that individuals are going to have to put in to make this a success. So time commitments, whereas before in this whole waterfall type process, the consultants go away, do their work, maybe ask for some clarifications here and there, do the weekly status reports, and then once the design is done, kind of send it over the fence, ask them to review the, 50, 100-page document, and then give their approval, and then we're going to start build. It's not like that anymore, right? We are SAP and recognized, right? We need to involve the customer early on what the system looks like. That means setting up best practices, doing a lot more playbacks, providing the client in some cases access to the system early for them to be able to kind of play around with it and see, obviously you have to guide them a little bit initially if they're new, but to see, how things behave. But that requires time commitment from the client. A lot of these guys are working hard at their day jobs, and the expectation has to be set and what type of commitment they need to make in order to be able to support this project. And then, whenever we do S4 implementation, there's a lot of excitement in the beginning, right? Everyone wants to be involved in the project. And what do we see? I know in a lot of my projects, right, we'd be in meetings and status reviews and things like that, and tons of people are in the room, especially in the beginning, and you don't 100% know what everyone's doing. So within this whole agile concept, right, the Scrum teams are obviously the key. Scrum teams, everyone in that Scrum team are active participants, whether they are consultants or they are, business users from the client. They're actively involved in the steps and the activities and the decisions that are being made within that Scrum team. There are no passive observers, because what happens is that things get more inefficient, right? Things slow down. All of a sudden, people are getting involved, and you don't really know, what their role is in the project. So it's important to establish a Scrum team, and usually, Scrum teams, again, it differs by project, but, typically say 5 to 9 people is kind of what we've seen works well, so that, everyone's knows what their role is, what they need to contribute to, what activities they need to do, etc. So that's what roles and responsibilities come in. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to involve anybody, in the project that wants to know what's going on. That's what the sprint playbacks are, right? So in the whole Activate methodology, as you're going into the realization build phase, you're doing sprints and then playbacks at the end of the sprint to show what has been accomplished in order to get sign off. Those playbacks could be a larger audience, right? To see kind of what's going on. But we've made a mistake before where we don't necessarily control the number of people that are involved in the Scrum team that does those daily Scrum calls, especially with COVID, right? Everyone's remote, and it's hard to know and keep in touch with everybody. These daily status calls become vital. And these daily status calls can't be 2-hour, 3-hour status calls, right? They're supposed to be 15, maximum 30 minutes, where people go in and talk about what they're doing, actually what they've accomplished, what they're going to be doing that day, and then anything that's blocking them from getting those things done. And if you have a huge team participating, well, that becomes unwieldy. You can't get the job done. The other thing is, as we're doing Activate, right, everyone kind of understand waterfall because they've done it in the past many times, but with Activate and this whole hybrid agile, it might be a little bit confusing. So, in the risk and issue log, we should track any risks or issues with this whole Activate methodology that's being used, whether it's time commitments or team makeups, or whatever it is. Those should be tracked in risks and issues logs and dealt with like any other issue in a process in a project. And they utilize necessary management tools. I've heard countless times, right? People get nervous about Agile because they think Agile means that you're short-circuiting certain things. How do I know how we're progressing in a sprint? How am I getting status reports? How do I know that, oh, I'm 50% done or 60% done? So that's where, again, setting expectations, understanding the tools that are going to be used, describing what burn down charts show. Those things end up being very important so that everybody, especially the client, executive sponsors, et cetera, completely understand how the project is going to work and how they're going to be able to get statuses. Let's go to the next slide. So train users, and this kind of linked between the two, right? Training users is important because everybody, including the consultants and the client, needs to know how you're going to be doing the project. That means that people have to be brought in to understand the benefits. They're seeing the system early. They're going to be able to influence the design much earlier, so that as you're seeing it being built, you don't have to worry about reading, huge documentation and hoping you understand what all this means to sign off on things. So those benefits should really resonate with most people. But with those, they need to understand how they need to conduct themselves in the entire process. That means participating in the daily calls, understanding that everything's being broken down into bite-sized chunks. So you're not worried about necessarily in those daily calls, oh my gosh, what's happening in the whole project? You're worried about, hey, what is being asked to be done today? And is there anything that's preventing me from getting that done? Whether it's a consultant doing the configuration or the process owners from being able to provide the necessary information or validate the design on time in order to keep the sprint going. And train leads on how to lead Scrum calls. This is really an art, right? These Scrum calls, if you don't know how to do these efficiently, they become these daily hour, 2-hour, 3-hour long calls where people don't know how to get their actual job done. These Scrum calls are supposed to be very efficient, 15 to 30 minutes. People literally, if everyone was together, stand up and talk about what they're talking about. But in COVID, obviously, it's over the phone or Zoom or whatever. But you really need to manage that so that if additional discussions are needed, those just become activities within that day that has to take place. They're not really meant for those daily status calls. It's just meant to, hey, listen, I need to talk to you about this. I have a little issue I need to discuss. That becomes offline and then reported the next day. Establish protocols on how playbacks, show and tells will occur. This is critical, right? You know, every client I've been to wants to, as far enough in advance, know when these types of things will occur, who needs to participate, and what information that's needed from them in order to be able to have this be a success. So it's critical during the prepare phase to make sure people understand when these show and tells will occur, who should attend, and send out invites early. At least block it out. Things can change, right? But at least block those out so that you know, there aren't any delays. The whole idea of Activate is you're doing these sprints, and they are supposed to be done, and decisions are supposed to happen quickly. So if you know someone's not available, that's critical because you schedule something, you know, the day before, you know, that causes issues in the project because you can't progress on to the other things until that person is there. So to the extent possible, make sure protocols are well understood on how these will occur and what the expectations are within these playbacks. And a lot of people always talk about, oh yeah, Agile means I can do whatever I want and not have to document anything. No, that's really not the case. That's a very dangerous precedent to set if that's how some people are kind of expecting to conduct Activate. There's, you know, as Dr. Bandi showed, right, there's plenty of templates to use to document how certain things are being done. All Activate is doing is changing the timing of how those documents get created. You're building those documents, showing the customer things that on how the system behaves, getting their approval, and then progressing on how you're building it. So it's not all done in the beginning, but rather done at stages as you build the system. Documentation still is important, right? You know, once consultants leave, who knows what's done in the system? Where is something that's showing how something was built so that if changes are required, we know how to make those changes. So training the users and understanding how all these things work is very important. So the next, plan sprints. When we create as a project manager the overall project plan, we need to make sure we spend time at the beginning of each sprint to plan those, right? There's a product backlog where we define all the work that needs to happen. As you pull from the product backlog for a particular sprint, we need to make sure we're planning it correctly based on our capacity to do work. That's always a challenge, to understand the capacity of your team. Once you know that capacity, you can now focus on what each sprint will need to accomplish. And you focus on the outcome. What is it that you want to accomplish? And then identify what the detailed steps are to accomplish that outcome. And the initial set of sprints usually are building the org structure, the basic configuration that's needed, and then you go into details on specific scenarios that need to be built. And it's very outcome scenario driven. That's what your sprint backlog should look like. And again, a lot of these things can't be planned in isolation. While we have separate sprints for order to cash, separate Scrum teams for order to cash, procure to pay, et cetera, as you're building these things out, they can't be done in isolation. This S4 ERP is a integrated system. What you do in procure to pay might impact order to cash and finance, et cetera. So anything that you plan, make sure you take into account cross-team dependencies so that your plan matches what another Scrum team is thinking. Next slide. Focus on data. Within Activate, data becomes hugely important because, believe it or not, when a client sees something, it's much easier for that person to agree or understand what you're demonstrating if they can at least recognize some of the data that's used, the master data. It's amazing how much a difference it makes if the material is actually, the description of the material is something that they're used to seeing in their legacy system. So, we need to spend time doing some initial either manual loads of data when we go through blueprinting and do show and tells, and then especially in the sprints to do additional data loads to support their sprint playbacks with actual data that they are used to seeing. We've got burned, before on that, where the client doesn't understand what they're seeing because the data is for a bicycle company versus what they're, building. So that becomes important. Brownfield, obviously, the data may already be there, but we need to talk about the cleansing requirements for that data to meet the new design requirements. Next slide. Proper participation, we talked about it, right? I mean, that is so key here. I mean, it becomes so important. If the right process owners aren't there, in your project from blueprinting all the way to testing, it's not going to work. We're doing these sprints and we're building things and we're doing playbacks, we're asking for validations and approvals. And if people aren't providing that in time, we're going to be lost. So setting expectations early, understanding roles and responsibilities, and escalating any issues with participation is even more important, we found, when we do these agile implementations than before. So those are really the 5 key things, at least I have learned as we have kind of implemented S4HANA, and wanted to impart that to you guys. So that's all I had. I'm sure maybe some of you guys have some questions. So the floor, I guess, is open.
Yeah, Dr. Bandi, if you could take any questions, we have just a few minutes left to end the webinar.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. We will be conducting, as I mentioned earlier, we will be conducting a few more sessions. Probably next time when we conduct a session, we will bring in the templates that we have used in each phase of the implementation. Take example, how did we leverage the project charter in the prepare phase? How did we leverage the technical specification document and functional specification template for our explore phase, and also in terms of realize how we have leveraged the data migration templates, be it integration specific testing templates, the test cases that can be leveraged to a greater extent. And then while we are doing a deploy, what is the cutover template really providing, and what additionals that we have added to it, how far that's useful, and how can we take it forward as a not only as a template, but also from an execution point of view. So we will be able to do that more specifically, so that some of the questions which are specific on what's the value add and how did we really leverage that. There is one more question.
Yeah, it is how can we report as PDUs for PMI?
Okay. Is it with regard to Project Management Institute certification, etc.? That's what is the question.
We don't have that details with us as of now.
Yeah, probably give Scott. Yeah, yes, it is for keeping the certification. Yeah, yes, SAP Activate methodology specific certification is available, and there are certain courses which are part of the Learning Hub. SAP also conducts multiple sessions. There are documents that are available both in PartnerEdge forum, and also you can also subscribe to SAP Activate Jam, so that you can work closely. Rather, you can also exchange views, opinions, and content, especially lessons learned, etc., with the larger community audience. So that's what. And from a PMI certification point of view, frankly, I have no idea about that. But SAP Activate certification is considered equivalently when you are approaching an SAP project, claiming yourself as a project manager. Okay, activate methodology certification helps, that much I can say. Yes, in the next session, as I mentioned, we will walk through the phases work streams more in detail. Today we wanted to focus more on the lessons learned, so that the experience can be shared with the practitioners and aspiring to be project managers. That's the intent. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Over to you, Jatin.
Dr. Bandi and Sandeep, thank you so much. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions right now. If we do not have the time to answer your questions, we will respond to those via email. If you have additional questions, please feel free to email us by responding to the email address on your webinar invite, and we will respond to you promptly. As I mentioned earlier, we will be sending out the recorded version of this webinar in the next few days. If you would like to start any new conversations, please email us at askask@keltontech.com or visit our website at www.keltontech.com. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Bandi and Sandeep. Have a great day.
You
Thanks.
too.
Bye bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye. Thank
and
you.
happy holidays for you all. We'll
Happy
connect
Yes,
in
holidays.
New
Yeah,
Year.
bye.
Thank you.
absolutely.